So welcome everybody. This is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices or SharePoint Dev Ecosystem, the monthly community call, and this is the January 2018 session. So nowadays, the SharePoint PnP equals the SharePoint Dev Ecosystem. Essentially, everything in the SharePoint development guidance and samples and everything else goes through our initiative. And we're being coordinated by the SharePoint engineering, and that's being obviously me and my managers and my team members who own the SharePoint framework and all of the SharePoint APIs as well. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm going to be the host today again. So I'm going to start with a 15 minutes intro, and then we're going to have 3 different demos slightly later today. But let's quickly have a look on the agenda. So I'm going to have a quick look on the SharePoint development, kind of a latest news. We're going to have a quick look on the roadmap, quick look on the new thing, on our UserVoice status, and a few other details. We will not have as exactly the same structure as previously in this monthly call. So we've been dropping some of the slides and rather referencing our monthly summary in the call. So yeah, and people are laughing because I always tend to use more than 50 minutes, and that's pretty well-known fact that these are pretty busy calls. Anyway, we have 3 different demos. Paolo is going to demonstrate or show in practice the preview of the upcoming third-party APIs and graph improvements with SharePoint Framework. And this is something which isn't quite necessarily working properly, but we kind of walk through the process and let's see how it's actually working today. And that's one of the reasons why it has not yet been shipped for preview. We are still working on making the whole functionality stable enough so we can start to preview and get the comments and feedback from the community side. Then after Paolo, we have Alex gonna do a nice demo around the log item command set customizer. Relatively simple customizer, but it actually is showing a quite nice business case and completely valid business case. So you're able to log items from a list for yourself using this SharePoint Framework extension. And then as a last but not least, Chris Kent showing the column formatting client-side web part. Super cool stuff on how to create column formatting definitions for list columns. So this is a web part which will give you, well, awesome experience on creating those column formatting definitions, much better than out-of-the-box experience because the out-of-the-box experience doesn't exist. So, but I'll let Chris to demonstrate that one as the final topic. And I can say Chris and Alex and Paolo on the call already, so that's all good. So let's actually get on going on the new structure on the presentation and a few news before we go to the demo section. Just quickly to introduction or explain, because there's always some new people in this call. On the SharePoint community and SharePoint development ecosystem side or SharePoint PnP side, you have multiple choices to align your participation based on your availability. So if you have questions, you want to have a random follow-up on random things, what's happening, you can always use our community SharePoint developer group in the AKMS SPPnP community URL. That's going to be in the tech community or Microsoft Tech community. And there's a group there called SharePoint developer where you can ask questions and people are helping on those questions. We do have bi-weekly SharePoint Framework special interest group call where we go through the latest on the SharePoint Framework, latest on PnP JS core, and for example, CLI, Office 365 CLI, and reusable controls, and all of the client-side development topics on the SharePoint. And that special interest group is meeting on bi-weekly basis. We also have a bi-weekly kind of a general SharePoint development special interest group call where we concentrate more on the, how would I put it, not a classic, but more managed code ways of customizing SharePoint. So essentially stuff which is running in Azure, time job based, remote time jobs, PnP CSAM, PnP PowerShell, and all of those scenarios. So not necessarily client-side development, but rather overall thinking on the SharePoint customizations. And then we have this monthly community calls, and this is essentially a summary on what has happened within the previous month, just covering the latest news and the latest announcements. And in all of these calls, we also have always live demos. So you can actually see something cool, typically. Well, all of them are super cool. And then there's hopefully always time for Q&A in the end as well. The monthly community calls are typically quite crowded, or they're quite busy, so there's not that much time in the end for Q&A, but during the call you can absolutely use the ION window. If you have any specific questions on the topics which we go through, we have PnP core team members, internal and external, helping on the questions as well. Good, let's get on going on things. So the only metrics and only number slide, which I wanted to quickly show just to, because we've been showing this since from the dawn of our monthly community calls from 2014. So we had quite a lot of people still watching our YouTube videos. We went slightly down from November during December, but that's completely understandable. December is a holiday season. We had anyway 118,000 watch time minutes in the YouTube channel, in the official SharePoint Dev YouTube channel. In the GitHub, we had 31,000 visitors on average in 2 weeks, which is quite nice number. And comparing, for example, what it was a year ago, this is triple the amount of visitors in a GitHub. So clearly people are learning more and more how to use GitHub and how to use open source initiatives for their business benefit. In the docs.microsoft.com, underneath the SharePoint Dev, we had 582,000 views, which is a relatively good number. It went also slightly down from November, but due to the holiday season, that is absolutely understandable. On the PnP reusable component side, we had more 8,000 tenants roughly using the PnP reusable components. These are PnP CSM component, PnP PowerShell, and PnP JS Core. The HTTP requests somehow magically went up 20% during December. We do not know why, because we don't have the data to understand that. But it seems to be that during December there was, potentially there was quite a lot of customers doing migrations and these tools to help on the migration side. So during holiday season, quite often people are migrating to a new platform, and that would explain the 20% increase on the traffic. And the most used capability again was the provisioning engine, which was used almost in 2,000 tenants within the last month. Now, on the general topics and general news, I will keep this one in our documentation or in our presentations in the future as well. So AKMS SP Dev Docs are official location for all of the SharePoint development documentation. So this includes adding model, SharePoint framework, future on-premises story, and everything. MSDN is gradually going to be locked down or archived, and all of our active and new documentation will be in docs.microsoft.com site. What's good about this one is that you are able to contribute. If you find a bug, you can contribute by letting us know that there's a bug on the documentation, or you can even contribute by submitting a pull request towards this material. Everything is in the GitHub under the SharePoint organization. Now, the other thing which we wanted to kind of help people to help them, or we want to improve the support story around the SharePoint Dev questions. In the past, if you haven't had a premier support and you've been contacting, for example, the Microsoft support and saying, well, I have this development topic and something seems to not work, it has been really difficult for you to get any assistance necessarily through the classic support or getting connected on the engineering. Now, we want to change this in the future because we want to help people to resolve these issues, and we want to have a channel where you can potentially report us any critical issues what you might run into. So we will actually know about them. So using the SP Dev Docs repository and issue list there, AKMS addresses, AKMS SP Dev issues, you are able to report issues towards the SharePoint engineering. And we are triaging these twice a week. And we also track them in our internal Visual Studio Online task list towards the engineering. And that's going to help us to know if there's any critical issues, if there's any issues also from a documentation side, we are tracking them using in here. So we know actually that something is wrong and we can easily fix that. If it's a small thing, we can fix that extremely fast, especially if it's a documentation issue. If it's a service level issue, then we'll see how fast we can actually resolve that. But please, please, please let us know. If something is wrong, you don't like something, you have a question, you have feedback, please use this. This is a great channel to get contacted directly with SharePoint engineering. And it's super useful for everybody in the SharePoint development. Now, on other topics, kind of a news, I wanted to quickly do a roadmap before we go into what has happened within the December. On the roadmap slide, this is something what we've been showing on the special interest group calls quite often. We have shipped quite a lot of stuff since the mid-September, and this is the time just before Ignite, because week before Ignite, we actually enabled SharePoint Framework in on-premises or within SharePoint 2016 feature pack 2. The latest thing which went live available is the site designs with an extensibility point. So this was something which we were planning to go live with by end of last year. We did, however, had some complications on getting that functionality available, and it gradually went enabled in the first release tenants during last week or end of last week by early this week. So already today, 100% of the first release tenants has now the site designs and site scripts extensibility story enabled. So we're able to actually create those site designs and site scripts. We will release a webcast on that topic also on next Monday, where we'll demonstrate how these things can be actually done in practice. There is a great documentation available on that one already. So coming soon, more Microsoft Graph support for SharePoint Framework, which will allow you to have any scopes in the Microsoft Graph, which is pretty cool. As long as the tenant administrator approves the scopes what your application is want to do. So we give full access and full flexibility for tenant administrators to control what are the permissions and Microsoft's Graph towards the Microsoft Graph or against any Azure Active Directory application in the tenant. So that means that you can secure, for example, third-party API calls within your SharePoint framework by using the Azure AD. And that's super cool. This is coming in this month. I can't give you an exact date, and there are some complications around this one. There's always some complications because it's coming to preview, it's not coming to production, but we're trying to figure out and fix those and get the stuff available for you to give us more feedback. Then the Hub site and Hub APIs are coming quite soon as well, and Groupify APIs are planned to go live during this quarter. There might be some delays on these, so please do not, let's say, commit your business or your, let's say, money investments based on this promise, because these dates might change absolutely. Now, other things which I wanted to quickly walk through, and clearly I'm not going to hit the 15 minutes at this time either, but it's good to know. So I quickly mention a few things around the user voice. So we do track the user voice entries. We've been, maybe in the past, you haven't seen that much activity. That much activity on the user voice side. We are tracking this in well, relatively not recently, quite often, and we are aware of the numbers. Let's put it this way. So I wanted to quickly walk through what are we doing and planning to do with this. No promises on the timelines, but let me explain quickly where we are, because I think that's slightly will be beneficial for you as well. So the taxonomy rest and taxonomy changes are in our roadmap later this year, this calendar year. Was looking into having more investments on the ECM side, on the document management and all of this side. And these are potential things which might be actually getting prioritized over there. Obviously, having the taxonomy REST API item, having more than almost 1,000 votes will definitely increase the priority of that particular item. So absolutely, we're looking into doing that. We absolutely understand that that's a high priority ask, and it has to be there. Because right now, the only way you can modify the taxonomy is by using the CSAM, which is not that flexible. Provide CSAM and REST APIs for recurring calendar events. Okay, 408, that's a really long and long-lasting requests as well. We'll be looking into that one. Add support for single-page application for SharePoint Framework. And there's another SharePoint Framework entry there as well. Add support for library packages for SharePoint Framework. Both of these are currently under discussion in our SharePoint Framework team, or within our team, which is who's responsible of the SharePoint Framework. Obviously, having more votes will help us to prioritize these things, but we absolutely acknowledge the request, and most likely these things will be enabling sooner or later. Support for .NET Core with CSAM. This is slightly more problematic than it might think, might be sounding. Do our build process. I'm not going to go into technical details. We understand the ask, and it has already 324 votes, so it's getting more visibility also internally. It is not, however, just a simple thing to make this happen within our monthly release cycle. So we're looking into that one. No promises when that might be coming available. Other than that, there's some CSON requests and REST API requests. The number 9 is kind of an interesting, the REST API citizenship. We are now looking into solving, finally, the automatic REST API documentation story. Not going to deep dive on the details on that one, but there are certain technical challenges around this story as well, because we need to figure out which of our REST APIs are internal, which of our REST APIs are public, because there is a difference between a publicly supported REST APIs and internal REST APIs, which are only meant to be used by the first-party experiences. But we're looking to come up with a proper story on that one within this quarter, hopefully, and we will get proper REST API documentation around that time frame. Good, small update on the things. I'm not going to go detailed on every single one of them, but I'm just going to ensure that everybody understands that we are actually tracking these things quite closely in the engineering side. Good. Quickly, January 2018 summary. Not going to deep dive again on these things. If you go to dev.ops.com/blogs, you will find the January 2018 update. That has massive amount of links, massive amount of information, what was actually released during this month. Not going to go through all of these things, but basically there was new samples on SharePoint Framework, new guidance videos and documentation on the SharePoint Framework side. There was again, obviously, a new version of the PnP PowerShell with the new commandlets available, which will help you to automate operations in SharePoint Online or in on-premises, and a new version of the PnP CSON core component. We also have the site design preview material is now available with the documentation side, and there is an open source JSON repository to share site scripts with the community. So you're able to already go there and have a look on, hey, are there any available sample site scripts, and you're able to use them within your tenant as a test exercise for the site scripts. We also have a migration guidance for classic experiences to modern experiences. You will see more on that one, more of that kind of guidance in the future. So we're really looking into helping you on doing the migration from the modern classic experiences in SharePoint Online to the modern experiences in SharePoint Online. And that should be pretty same with the SharePoint 2019. I cannot confirm yet that the modern experiences will be in 2019, but obviously that is absolutely our intention. So in SharePoint 2019, it would have the modern experiences inside of it. Office 365 CLI updates, which is a great capability as well, and new column formatting as samples are available. Good. Moving on things, quite a lot of new webcasts. Obviously, the webcasts are quite important within our guidance. They are interactive. We are talking about the actual implementation of the capability and the recommendations of the capability. So we are planning to release a new webcast roughly once a week or bi-weekly in the future as well, and 2 new PnP short videos during the December timeframe. Good. Thank you for your assistance. And again, I'm not going to mention all of you, but thank you for assisting us on this journey with your contributions in the GitHub or in other community channels. Your contributions will help the others to succeed. And this is how things are evolving across the whole IT community. So more and more people are using open source, and more and more we're working together towards solving these things. So thank you for being part of this journey. And thank you for all of these companies allowing their employees to be part of this open source community initiatives as well. So allowing their employees to spend time and contributing towards the company work, towards the open source community work. Now, on the Microsoft side, our team is growing as well. So multiple people coming from different sections and different organizations from Microsoft side, helping on this journey, helping either by contributing in the community sites in the same way as the external community, or that it might be part of their job to be part of this community and open source initiatives. But thank you for your contributions as well. Now, on the demo section, 20 minutes, not too bad, actually. Let's start with Paolo, and Paolo can actually start sharing because Paolo, you are a presenter, good. And then we go to Alex, and after that to Chris.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I'm going to share my screen.
So yes, thank you, Vesa. And let's see how to create a SharePoint framework solutions which can leverage the new capability in order to consume the Microsoft Graph API or any other third-party APIs using a custom set of permission scopes. So first of all, let's see one demo in which I simply consume the Microsoft Graph to browse and to search for specific users with a name or display name or last name matching a search criteria. In order to do that, first of all, in the package solution JSON file, you will have to specify the permission scopes that you will need. And as you can see here, there is a new configuration parameter called Web API permission requests, which is an array of permission requests. Each of them is made of a resource ID and of a scope. The resource ID can be the name of the target API that you want to consume and for which you want to have a specific permission scope, or can be the object ID of that resource. Bear in mind that the object ID is unique per tenant. So if you want to create a multi-tenant solution, or if you are an ISV that want to sell your solution to multiple customers, it's better to use the name of the API. The object ID will be tied to the specific tenant in which you are. The same applies for the scope. You can provide the name of the scope, or you can provide the global unique identifier of the scope. In my opinion, both the name of the app and the name of the scope are better than the GUID, of course. And here we are just requesting for the permission to access all of the basic information of all of the user in our tenant. So user.readbasic.all for the Microsoft Graph. Once we have declared the permission request, which can be multiple, we can have multiple permission scopes requests here in the JSON file, we need to consume the target API. And to consume any of the target API, whether it is the Graph or any other third-party API, we have two new types available in SPFX. There will be available as soon as this capability will be released. So let me go to the React component under the cover of my solution. And here I have two different options. The first one uses the AAD HTTP client type, which is a new one, which will be released in preview pretty soon. And through this type, as soon as you create a new instance of it, you can provide the service scope of the current SPFX context, as well as the unique URI of the API that you want to consume, which is https://graphmicrosoft.com for the Microsoft Graph, but can be whatever else if you want to consume any third-party API. Once you have an instance of this AAD HTTP client type, you can simply use the get, post, or fetch methods to make an HTTP get or an HTTP post request, or whatever else request using the fetch and providing proper HTTP client configuration and options. Here, for example, I want to search for the users. So I'm using the users endpoint of the Graph v1, and I'm selecting just few properties of every single user, which will match a filtering criteria based on the given name equal to a value that I will ask through the UI of my web part, or the surname, or the display name. So this is just an Open Data Protocol query filter. So I make a GET request for this URL, and I will get back, as usual, I would say, whenever you consume an HTTP-based API, I will get back a JSON object, which I can parse and which I can use to do proper mapping between the array of users matching the search criteria, if any, and a fully typed array that I can use to do data binding of my result in the UI of the client web part. This is one option using the AAD HTTP client. And as I said, you can use it for first parties or third-party APIs, so for the Microsoft Graph or for any other third-party APIs. Moreover, if your target is just and only the Microsoft Graph, you can even use the MS Graph client type, which is yet another new type which will be introduced in the upcoming release of SPFX. And with the MS Graph client, you will create a client object ready to go, ready to consume the Microsoft Graph only. As you can see, you still need to use the service scope of the SPFX context. You will need to provide the service key of the Microsoft Graph, and using this kind of fluent API where you mix fluent methods and strings like here and here and here, you define that you want to use the API for the users in version 1.0. You want to select those properties of every single user matching the filtering criteria provided right here. And the filtering criteria will still be an Open Data Protocol filter based on a string that you have to provide. Then you make an HTTP GET request and you get back, as before, a JSON object that you need to map to a result, which in our scenario, in our sample, will be bounded to a list, to a detailed list of Office UI Fabric. So that's it from a development perspective. Once you have done that, you will need to bundle your solution and to package your solution so that you will get back an SPPKG file that you can simply deploy, you can simply install in the app catalog of your tenant. So let me go to the app catalog of my target tenant and let me get the SPPKG file just to show you what will happen. Drag and drop the file on the app catalog. And as usual, you will see the prompt UI to deploy the package in your application catalog. But as you can see here in the lower part of the screen of the pop-up dialog, you also have, please go to the Service Principal Permissions management page to approve pending permissions. Why? It is happening because in the package solution.json file, we declared one or more web API permission requests. And because of that, we will need to go to the admin UI of SharePoint Online. So let me do that. We will need to use the new admin center, which is under preview right now. So click on this guy. And in the UI, we can access the app management link through which we can see all of the permissions already applied or those still pending approval. And as you can see here, we have 3 permissions which are already active and 2 more which are still pending approval. You can select any of the pending approvals, permissions requests, and you can approve or reject them from an admin perspective. So basically, a dev can create the package, give it to an admin will deploy the package in the app catalog and approve the permissions, either using the web UI of the admin center of SharePoint or using a bunch of PowerShell, because you can do that also using PowerShell. You can even revoke a permission that you already provided. You can remove any already approved permission if you want, so that you have full control of all of the custom permission scopes, both for the Microsoft Graph and for any other third-party API at tenant level. Bear in mind that those permissions are at tenant level, so you cannot define permissions specific for a single application. They will be defined at tenant level. Once you have done that, you will be ready to use your custom solution in SharePoint Online and to consume the target API. What will happen under the cover will be that in the Azure Active Directory tenant under the cover of your 365 tenant, there will be a SharePoint Online client service principal registered with a bunch of permissions configured as it is for any other application registered in Azure AD, and the permissions registered for that specific application will be the permissions allowed to any application that will consume the graph or any third-party API using the SharePoint framework. That's the overall idea. So let me switch to my browser and let me show you how you can use this client-side solution. But before doing that, let me start with gulp serve -- no browser, my solution. As soon as the solution will be ready and running, we will be able to switch to the SharePoint workbench, for example, in SharePoint Online, and play with the client-side web part we just created. So here we are in SharePoint Online. Here I already have my client-side web part inserted in a workbench page. As you can see, the client-side web part has a search text box, which is the one I use to search for any specific target user. And by clicking on the search button, I will fire either the search using the AAD HTTP client or the MS Graph client. And I can select which one I want to use using the configuration panel of the client-side web part. I can select the AAD client or the MS Graph client. By clicking on the search button, an authentication process will start, which will leverage ADIL.js, so Active Directory Authentication Library for JavaScript under the cover, to retrieve an open authorization access token, which will be used to consume, in this scenario, the Microsoft Graph or whatever else third-party API. So let's play with it and let's see how it works. We are searching for user 1, click on search, a pop-up dialog will pop up to get the OAuth access token, and here we have the result from the graph. We can switch to MS Graph client as well, we can make another search, and that's it. It works like a charm. So let me go back to the source code, and I think that's it. We saw how you can use both the MS Graph client or the AAD HTTP client to consume the Microsoft Graph or any third-party API. We saw that you need to specify the permissions in the package solution.json file, and there can be multiple permission requests here. And once you have done that, you package your solution, you deploy the solution on the app catalog, you approve the permissions, you or your admins approve the permissions, and you are ready to go. And you are ready to enjoy and to consume any first-party or third-party API. I think it is really, really powerful because it allows to create real business solutions, real enterprise-level solutions, having a bunch of REST APIs in the backend, I mean third-party APIs, secured using Azure AD and open authorization. And that's great. So I'm really looking forward to having this capability in preview for anybody else on the network. And thank you, Vesa. Stage back to you.
Because this is using what's called Monaco Editor, which is kind of the base for Visual Studio Code. So we get nice things like, when we have problems here, you can start to see it highlights the line where there's a problem. If you hover over the squiggly, right, you're going to get a hint as to what's going on. We also have this little guy over here in the preview pane, which will give you even more hints exactly what's kind of going on with the JSON or the column formatting errors itself. So you can correct that, and you'll notice that as you correct things, and as you type, things begin to show up as expected. So I can, let's see, current field. We'll start to see the display right there. Now, because this is using Monaco Editor, we get a lot of other code features here, right? Like we can get code folding. We also get a command palette. So if you're going to hit F1, you're going to get access to a ton of stuff. So I can type in like find here. I get a nice find window, so if I want to find where all those exclamation points are, I can also expand that and do a replace, whatever I need, right? We also get some theming options here. You can kind of change that around. So where does this data come from? Well, if we take a look over here, expand that over here, all of that is totally customizable. So if you want to add some additional items right here, so you want generous butter, I don't know, it's always butter. Right, you could put, generous dude, that kind of thing. Right, so to get exactly the kind of values you want, but because column formatting also lets you reference other, items within your row, you can add additional columns here, and you can set those types to whatever you need. Right, so you want to do a date time, you want to change those up, or you can do a person, and you can set the email address or whatever the other, properties you want to set on all of that to make sure that you're getting exactly what you want over here as you're working on your code. Okay? All right, so one of the other things you can do, though, so you can always start from scratch, but you can also open items. So say you've got, an existing column format, maybe someone else put it together, you like it, but you want to switch it up just a little bit. So what you can do is you can say open from a local list. So you choose your list here and choose your field. Hit OK. And it's going to load that right up, and you can begin toggling the sample data, whatever you need, right? You want to say, I don't want a checkbox, or I don't want a check mark. All of those things are available to you. Now, an even easier way to get going with this stuff is to use one of these wizards and templates. There's currently 10 of them, but those are fully extendable, and if you're looking for a way to contribute, that is an awesome way to contribute. Please do. So you're going to pick your column type. So we'll say in this case, we'll do a template like number trending. All right, so a template is going to give you a nice starter set of data. It's also going to give you some code here, so you can really get going and editing from an example, which is a lot easier to do than trying to look at a blank screen and write from scratch. But even more powerful than these templates are wizards. So we'll take a look at one here. So a wizard provides you with a custom interface so that you can edit the values as needed, and things will update directly on the screen. You don't even need to see the code if you don't want to. Of course, you can. It's fully available to you, and you can take off from the code as needed. And you're good to go, which is an awesome way to learn. But now when you're all done, there's a couple of different ways you can save this. So if you want to save it, you can, of course, download it. It'll generate a JSON file and put that in your downloads folder. You can also copy that to your clipboard. You can save it to a local library. So you just pick your library here, and we'll call it myfield.json to save that. But even more powerfully, you can apply this directly to a local list. So if we go back to that list I used earlier, and we say my stuff, let's pick the progress field this time. We're going to save that. If we take a look here and refresh, there we are. So very simple for an end user. You didn't have to write code. You just customize that exactly the way you wanted it, and you're good to go. Right? Okay, so if we're back to Todd, right, and we want to get that due date, we can pick the overdue, hit that. We can save that directly to our local list. There you go. We didn't need to do anything else. We refresh that again. There we are. So Todd's happy, everybody's happy, and we're good to go. A couple of notes on this and how this was put together, just from a code perspective and where this is located. You can find this in the SPDev Solutions repository. So if you guys haven't checked this repository out, it is full of really awesome stuff. These are, so in contrast to the existing SPDev FX Webparts repo, which are largely aimed at developers, right, to give examples of very specific integrations or how to do something, these are fully complete solutions. So check these out. They're going to give you a lot of stuff. Again, because they're open source, you can still learn from them, right, really dive into the code as needed. But a lot of these are ready to go because they are they've got a full life cycle taken care of.
And Chris, on that one, Vesa here now back that my Wi-Fi network and mesh is back on horrible crash. Now, so on this one, just to kind of position this properly as well. So absolutely, if any of the people who are in this call have contributed already in SPDev FX Webparts, but your solution is expanding, it is getting more polished, it's more ready, it's more ready to use sample solution. You can relocate this the web part in here because this is meant to be more, let's say, polished set of web parts. These have not been, all of this have not been also updated always to the latest version of SharePoint framework. So some of the stuff is still using, for example, 1.3.4, not 1.4. I know that Chris's stuff is using 1.4 because he's always updating his stuff. But like I said, these are really good, and column formatting has Chris has created made a really great job also on the documentation side around this one. So there's a nice README and there's additional docs which are explaining how the web part is working. So SPDev Solutions under the SharePoint organization. And great timing from Bo at the same time as Chris. So cool. Good. Anything else what you wanted to still go through, Chris, on this one?
No, I just say from a code perspective, this again, take a look at it, but this is built on React. This is a React web part, but it's heavily using React Redux. Which, if you haven't looked at that, if you're doing anything fairly complicated with state management, Redux, you're going to want to look into it. It's not as scary as it seems. There's a few great videos and demos out on there. It's a lifesaver when you start to look at all these different interfaces and windows kind of going on. And then, of course, it's using PnP, JS Core, and several other libraries. So there you go.
Cool. And I pasted in the SPDev column formatting link also to the Iron window. This is that's basically for open source column formatting JSON files. So you can use Chris's tool and Chris's Webpart to create JSON files and then contribute them in the SPDev column formatting repository. That's one way of contributing also for the community. There's some new stuff on that side as well. But really, really great Webpart. It's super polished. It has a super set of capabilities combined in a single solution. But I think that's it for this one. I'm going to flip back on the slides, and we seem to have some time for Q&A as well, which is good, even though I took slightly longer time on the start as expected. I will trademark the VESA SPF PnP contributor award statue. Okay. But that was an awesome example from Chris, because it is super polished. And in general, if you go to that SPDev Solutions repository, you are able to find great samples from other contributors as well, which are more polished. And here we go. I'm just double checking that I'm not missing anything. There we go. Now we're on a Q&A. Clearly that guy doesn't know anything because he's showing his hands, not me. But if there's any open questions or open things which we did not probably go through during the day, just please use Iron window. Potentially you can unmute yourself as well. And great stuff again on this month, absolutely. We seem to always have every single month, there's always great contributions around. Obviously, there's involvement of the guidance and samples from the engineering side as well and the documentation, but also excellent community contributions. So going through at least the monthly summary will give you the headlines of what has happened in the previous month, because we do know that not that many people have a chance to follow up on what we do on a day-to-day basis. So that's why we do the monthly summary and also the monthly blog posting in the devtodocs.com/blogs. Good. Just double checking. And that's a good point from around the asset bundling, asset packaging. So basically the Webpart is using the 1.4 default. So if you have a Office 365 CDN, public CDN enabled, it's going to serve the assets directly from CDN. If it's not, then it's going to serve the assets directly from the site collection app catalog, or potentially from a site collection app catalog. So both of those are available nowadays in SharePoint framework. So super simple way of getting a sample and hosting that within any tenant. And that's a good point from Chris. That's something which I'm not sure if we never actually mentioned that. We might have mentioned that in some of the videos. But if you have enabled Office 365 public CDN, when you enabled Office 365 public CDN, we do set the default origins for the public CDN. And if you had actually enabled the Office 365 public CDN before the 1.4 going live, when we introduced this new site assets CDN origin, that CDN additional origin was not created by default automatically in the CDN. So now if you want to use the Office 365 public CDN, just disable and enable, and that will create the client-side assets default origin, or you can add a new origin within your tenant by using the add sp tenant CDN origins command line. Or Office 365 CLI, that's actually capable of doing that as well. Does column formatter solution works in SharePoint 2016 on-premises? Nope, because it's using 1.4. So the SharePoint 2016 feature pack 2 is basically using the SharePoint Framework 1.1 version of the SharePoint Framework. So it is something which might be evolving in SharePoint 2016 in the future, most likely, well, not super fast, and we can't promise that that's going to happen. In SharePoint 2019, there will be a new version supported in on-premises. The reason why we support 1.1 in on-premises is that there is a server-side dependency on SharePoint Framework. So you cannot use the 1.4 on-premises without updating the server side as well. And we haven't actually updated the server side. Well, there has not been any additional feature packs for SharePoint 2016 since the feature pack 2. So calling other permissions besides groups and reports using graph HTTP clients is already live? No, it isn't. So that's something which isn't available yet. It will be available relatively soon. If you follow up on our social media channels, Twitter and Facebook and our blogs, you will see whenever the additional scopes and additional configuration options is fully supported and available. So you will absolutely we will follow up on the guidance. We'll have videos and everything else available at that point. That was a preview what Paolo showed today on the upcoming capability. There might be some changes around details of that one before it actually goes live. Any prediction for column formatting in a list views webparts to be available? Well, we know to ask. One thing might be that you actually would go to the SPDev docs issue list and request that or have a question there, because then we can easily reroute that to the owners of the column formatting capability, and they will see that, hey, there's a demand for making this happen. Now, to be honest, it's relatively logical that the list view web part would support the column formatting and custom field customizers when it's used in the UI. So sooner or later, that's going to happen. When I can't give you a timeline for that one yet. Good. I think we can pretty much close up for now. So please use the SPDevDocs repository issue list for, let's say, if you find any gaps, any issues in our documentation or in the SharePoint Framework development topics in general, not just SharePoint Framework. Please let us know. Also, please use the tech communities for asking questions. We try to follow up on them as well, but obviously there's way too many channels to keep up with the things. This one was a great, no doubt, monthly webcast. We have the recording saved. I double-checked from Mike Amelan. So Mike, thank you for saving our recording. So I have to start, Mike has the ending. So we're able to combine that using computation magic. And most likely we'll have a fully functional, full recording available tomorrow within 24 hours in the YouTube channel. Have a look on the Twitter tweets when the recording is available if you're interested in sharing this one for anybody else. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you Chris, Alex and Paolo for your demos, and thank you everybody else for your contributions for this monthly summary.